Good afternoon. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to our professional development session for today. And I did not double check the date, but a couple of months back, Jenisha presented a session on feedback that we got involved with and really wanted to take a deeper dive into it. So she agreed to come back today and present another session on feedback, but with a different spin on it. So we're going to let Jenisha share with us some of the positives and the advantages and the end results for using the feedback that we get from our students in order to improve our courses. So thank you, Jenisha, for being here with us.
Thank you, Judy, for that awesome introduction, as always. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today in this professional development session. As Judy mentioned, this idea for today's session came from the session I previously did, which was about why we provide student feedback, right? So looking at why instructors should provide feedback and we had some discussions about how to provide that feedback and meaningful feedback and why is it important. I thought today what we would do is talk about using the student feedback that we get. So the reverse of what we kind of did last time, but using that student feedback to impact our teaching practices. So to get us started, we are going to take a moment to reflect. I like to start the sessions asking you to really think about the why behind any and everything that we do, because a lot of times that is what directs you, right? So take about 30 seconds to reflect on why you have or have not requested feedback from your students. So we'll just take quiet 30 seconds. If you'd like to type into the chat, you can tell us about why you have or have not requested feedback from your students, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So we've got to get their perspective. I like to also think about the other personal side to this, right, is that we're all humans. And so sometimes getting feedback from others can be a little challenging, right? So we could have that uncertainty, trepidation about what someone might have to say about the way that we teach or the content that we have, right? So yes, students always have ideas about what it is that we're teaching, right? They always have probably new, fresh ideas, new perspectives on what it is that the content that we're giving to them. So that's why it's important to have an idea of what is your why, because a lot of times when we're asked to do new things and we might have a little uncertainty or apprehension, we need to figure out why we have that apprehension so that we can get over that hurdle and do what's best for our students. So today we're really going to delve into teacher practice, right? And using student feedback to impact that teacher practice and how we do it. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start and we're going to talk about the what and why. We'll talk about some of your current practices. I really want this to be interactive for you to have an opportunity to open your mic and ask any questions or add any comments, because really this is a community for us to learn from each other. We'll talk about best practices, methods, and then what to do when we have that data and how to implement it. So the what. In my first session, we talked about student feedback, right? So that was information provided about academic performance, where we were bridging the gap between expectation and the work that was produced. On the other side, when we look at students providing teachers with feedback, it's information about instruction, and we can use that information to improve the way we teach or our instruction. The why. We should get feedback from students to help guide us into what we're going to do next. And like I said, how we're going to improve our teaching. Like a couple of you have already mentioned, students always have ideas, and we need to take into consideration the things that in their experience that might help them be better learners and also us be better teachers. So here's your first opportunity to raise your hand, have your mic unmuted, and participate in the discussion. How do students provide you with feedback? What is it that you do that gives students an opportunity to provide you with feedback? And these are all really great ways, quick and efficient ways to get that feedback from students. Judy, did you want to talk about any of these methods that you felt maybe you've used a lot more than others, that you felt like maybe students connected to better than others?
Yes, I was gonna comment on the fact that that they may not feel really comfortable, even though we are asking, they might not feel as comfortable as we would like, which is why, some form of anonymous feedback is a good one. Um, Slido is, as you know, is a tool that I love and truly appreciate because it is anonymous, and yet it gives them a chance to really express how they feel. So, and then what's interesting to me is the comment about their questions, because when our students ask questions, while we don't immediately think of it as feedback, it actually is based on something that they're not sure about. And so their questions can lead us to a conversation about what they're concerned about and why and what it's all about. Um, I didn't put in the poll, but it also seems to me that some of the responses from from their submissions would be a really good resource for us to take a look at and see how they see what's going on in their heads. In fact, maybe even just asking them about the specific assignment and how it felt to them, and perhaps even how it could be improved. I don't know. That's putting myself out there, but I'm okay with that.
Because getting feedback, right, it's a moment of vulnerability, right, to some degree, because you have to be okay with other people critiquing what it is that you're doing. And so when you mention the anonymous surveys, right, it might be important to also have that conversation with students about, this might be difficult for you to give some critique. But here's why it's important. Here's how this is going to improve this class, not just for you, but for other students who are coming down the line. And I guess also depending on when you ask for that feedback, that can also impact students during that semester that you're teaching.
Yeah, and the other thing I was gonna add on that, um, the spot surveys certainly come after the class is over. And yes, I think most faculty look at them and think about what they're saying. But to ask them their perspective on something that we have done at some point throughout the semester And then if they actually see us making adjustments and changes based on that, then they realize that what they are, the information they're providing us is important, and that we felt that their opinion was important. So that's the spots at the end helps the next sets of students, but getting surveys and questions during the semester is a great way to let them know that we do care.
Right, I agree. And it reminded me of also something that you said earlier about how sometimes we don't think about certain things that we do as getting feedback from students, right? But when you do have those personal meetings with students and you talk about their questions, right? That's another opportunity for you to kind of reflect on, well, what is it that maybe I missed that this might be that one student who might not understand, but do other students maybe have this exact same question, but they're maybe a little intimidated or timid, and so they won't ask you for some feedback or for some clarification on whatever that assignment is. So definitely student questions are another way that we can get feedback in a more informal way. So I always say never dismiss anything because everything has value. So here are a couple of ideas or probably easier ways that students can provide you with feedback. So one of the ways is to do check-ins, and the time interval of when you do these check-ins can vary based on kind of what works for you and what works for your students. So these check-ins are scheduled meetings where you can discuss how the course is going. Another way that you could do that is if you had set up, for example, some virtual meeting and students had questions, right? That's another opportunity for you to get some feedback on how the course is going or how a particular assignment is going. From these check-ins, you'll most likely get some qualitative data, right? Because there won't be any numbers that you will get from that type of feedback. Reflection journals, I thought that was a pretty interesting way to get feedback from students. So I've seen this done a couple of different ways. You can do a reflection journal at the end of a module or at the end of some content area. You could also do a reflection journal at midpoint of the semester or after you've had a big assignment and you want students to reflect on how that assignment went for them. What are some things that they probably could have used some assistance with so that future students could do better? What I really like about these reflection journals is it really gives students an opportunity right after that assignment or assessment has happened to really kind of reflect on what are some things that they felt really went well, what are some things that they feel like could help them do better if they had to redo it, or what are some things that they would recommend for future students on how they could do better at that assignment or assessment. And again, another touch point, this is more qualitative data. For me, I find that if you're looking for specific feedback on specific assignments or the course overall, that qualitative data will probably give you a better idea of how things are going. And more details.
Forgive me for interrupting, but we can also send out a sample of a reflection journal format when we send out this information. And your comment on the check-ins, I know of a couple of faculty members who do an asynchronous meeting, but not a required one before quizzes or exams, to give students the opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback on things that perhaps they don't understand. So that's another way of using the check-in.
And then spots. I think we all kind of know what the spots are. Spots are good, but they won't give you the data that you might be looking for during the semester if you wanted to make any adjustments or changes to your course to better suit the needs of your students that are currently in your course. So those are just a couple of ideas and a couple of things that were also kind of mentioned in that first survey. So what I find we might struggle a little bit with is what are the questions that you would ask students to get some feedback on the course. If you wanted feedback on exactly how the course was going, or if you wanted feedback on the assessment, I wanted to take this time to really brainstorm because this is a community of other instructors of what are some questions that you could ask students that you found have really worked, just so that we could get a repository of questions that might be helpful to others. So I have a couple of examples of some questions that you could ask students, but I thought it was important to always remember that we have to prompt students and show students how to provide meaningful feedback. For some students, for some people in general, really, they haven't received meaningful feedback, so they don't know what that looks like. So it's always important to prompt to give them examples of what meaningful feedback looks like, so that when they get ready to respond and engage in that conversation with you, then they have an idea of, yeah, this class was terrible. That's not helpful because as an instructor, we don't know what was terrible or what it is that you struggled with so that we can make it better for the next class. So a couple of questions I have are, for example, what strategies are most effective at helping you stay engaged? What aspects of the course and or instruction helped you learn? What aspects might be changed to help future students learn more effectively? So those are just a couple of questions that you might want to ask students if you're trying to get some feedback about the course. Judy, do you have any particular questions that you may have asked students?
Yeah, it took me a while to be able to get into the into the Slido, but yeah, I truly would like to, and I have on occasion, but not as much as I should have, want to know what I can do to support them, to support their learning. How can I help? I typically do that toward the beginning of the semester, and we talk about what other faculty, how other instructors have given them guidance, but I want to I do specifically ask them what I can do to support their learning and to make it impactful for them. It's it opens me up, but they're pretty good about letting me know.
Yeah, because I think sometimes when we get ready to brainstorm these questions, there's that hesitancy of, well, they don't really know. But I think when you give students an opportunity to actually reflect and give you answers to questions and you're open and willing to learn with them, I think it definitely creates a culture of openness and a culture of your feedback is valuable and meaningful. And I think students really appreciate that.
They do, and I love your comment about the things about helping them stay engaged. The when I have worked on a question similar to that, they are pretty open and honest about what things support them being engaged and actively involved. And while there probably is no surprise here, they typically say they want to interact with each other. They want to hear. They also want to hear specific examples of teaching practice. But I teach pre-service teachers, and so they want to know, okay, what works? in the classroom. They want you to share those things, but they also are really good about saying they want to know, they want to be actively involved, they want to dig into the information and then share it within the class.
Yeah, and having that information ahead of time really gives you an opportunity to tailor some of the content to what it is that students are really hoping to get out of the course. And I know it's not, we can't change everything about the course, right? There's going to be those assessments that you
Yeah.
have to have, but
Yeah.
really being able to create content or provide students with content or giving them some space to find some content that's really
Yeah.
important to them really helps them stay engaged, and it makes the course more valuable to students in the long run.
Yes, absolutely. And I love your last one about what can be changed to help future students learn more effectively. I follow Michelle Pacansky Brock, yeah, Pacansky Brock, and on humanizing online teaching. And one of the things that she does on a regular basis is at the end of the semester has them post on a Padlet board or something similar tips for the next set of students, which I love. It lets these students know that what they have experienced is important and that it's important to share. I love that.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that, because not only does it allow students to give other students advice, but as an instructor, I could also look at that and say, oh, that's a piece of advice that they would give another student, but how could I take some of that and incorporate it into the instruction of maybe something that wasn't clear, or maybe there's something else that I need to add for students to be more successful. So that's
Yeah. And there's often surprises in there, something that just you might have just kind of randomly thrown out there and it made an impact on someone, and I love that. So you never know. You never know.
this is definitely true. You just don't know. And like we said earlier in the presentation, students have great ideas.
Yeah.
We just have to listen to what it is that they have to say. So I thought this quote was interesting. It says, your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. And I seem to find a lot of quotes by Bill Gates, but this is another one by Bill Gates. So just take a minute to kind of think about that, right? And yes, sometimes students are not unhappy with the content, they're not unhappy with us as instructors. But if there are some things that they were a little unhappy about, taking some time to kind of reflect as instructors of why they were unhappy about it. And are there really some things that we can do to improve as instructors to better help the next group of students?
But man, Jenisha, talk about being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. But yeah, that's a huge step, but a valuable one.
Mm-hmm. Which is why I started the presentation about thinking about why do we ask students for feedback, or why haven't we allowed students to provide us with feedback, right? Because it is really vulnerable. It takes a lot to just be able to say, okay, this is an area that maybe I need to improve on. This is something that I really didn't expect students to say that they were unhappy about. But realizing that at the end of the day, you'll be a better instructor, right? You'll be a better person that helps guide students on whatever path it is that they're going on next. But like you said, Judy, definitely a moment of vulnerability. The next part is to kind of think about what you learned from those evaluations when you ask students for feedback. And whether that is through check-ins, you did a journal reflection, maybe you haven't used any of those methods, maybe you just looked at your spots data, What did you learn from those evaluations, and how did it affect your teaching practices?
When I ask them about how I can best support their learning, I keep those comments close in my folder as I'm building the rest of the course and adding to it so that I can uh, make sure that I include some of the things that they've mentioned in those when I ask them about how to support their learning. Not you can't always include everything, but you have to give it a try.
Yeah, and I think in doing research to prepare for this presentation, that was one of the things was, when students are going to expect you to incorporate every single last thing that they said was wrong with your course, and they're going to expect you to change it. But no, I think being open and transparent with students about, well, this is some of the feedback that I've gotten in the past, and here's how I've made those changes to my current course. But just letting them know that all of their feedback is valuable, so that they don't feel like they're doing it in vain.
Yeah, and some of the faculty that I have done, particularly one I'm thinking of who does a just kind of a overview review thing before the quizzes, he's really good about, particularly when they have questions, reminding them of where they, where they can find that information, and guiding them into making sure that they know that if the information is there for them, where they can find it and how they can incorporate it into their study skills, which is an important thing. Most of us, or I won't say us, but I would say that the assumption would be, if I'm doing a review thing, I expect you to know what we've covered and know what questions you want to ask. And so it's a great way of incorporating your intent in as far as the content is concerned, with your expectation of how they're going to be able to use that information.
So a few key points to remember. I kind of said this already. You should inform students of how you're going to use their responses to improve your teaching. I think this just goes back to being visible, letting students know that the comments that they provide are important. And maybe, like I said, also providing them an example of how previous feedback has changed or affected the current course that you're teaching, the one that they're currently in. I thought it was also important to really mention that no one method of feedback, collecting feedback, offers a complete view of the quality of your teaching, right? So there's going to be multiple sources of data that you're going to use to give you a good idea of how you are as an instructor. And then interpreting and using student feedback is a cyclical process. So you're going to get some information from some groups of students. You're going to make some tweaks here. It might work summer 22, and then you make some tweaks again for fall 22, and you realize maybe that doesn't work. So we'll have to continue to get feedback, make some tweaks, adjust, and then just keep going, right? It's just like learning. We learn a little bit, we make some changes, we make some adjustments, and we learn some more. So it's definitely a cyclical process. So we have asked students for their feedback. We have the data. Now what do we do with it? This first point really goes into the vulnerability of receiving feedback. And it could go from your side as the instructor or even as students, right? I remember the first time I got my first criticism from an instructor about the work that I was doing. And it hurt, right? Because we're humans. We're not used to receiving that kind of feedback. So always remember that how that as instructors, we are modeling how to receive and respond to the feedback that students are providing us with. Be open to the feedback, allow students to be honest with whatever it is that they need to say about the course, obviously not to be disrespectful, but that goes back to modeling what effective feedback looks like. When we have that data, look for patterns. Don't dismiss any comments because, again, their points are valid. You might have that one-off comment that you might think is completely random. You have no idea where it comes from. But if you've shown students how to give effective feedback, they will then give you specific examples of, okay, this is why this assessment, this whatever did not make sense. And then you can take an opportunity to kind of reflect through it. I think it's important to remember that we're here for students. And so if we look for comments and we don't dismiss, if we look for patterns and don't dismiss their comments, we will see that students are just giving us their perspective on what has happened in the course. And then I thought this last point was really important. Is having an opportunity to collaborate with your colleagues, right? So you've gotten this data either from the spots or you've used in a reflection journal or you're doing a live session with a check-in. Talk to other instructors about the feedback that you've gotten from students. What does it really mean? How do you break it down? Other instructors may have gotten that same feedback and they could probably provide you with some ways or some examples of how they have made some adjustments to their course with the feedback that they were given. I think it's also important to create a space amongst other colleagues during professional development sessions like this is really important, where it's safe and caring environment where you can talk about some concerns or some challenges that you're having within your course, as well as the feedback that you've gotten, and talking about ways to make that a better space for your students and their learning.
The very fact that we're having this conversation is just so leaves such a positive perspective in my mind, because it is faculty, it shows that we have faculty who truly care about student success. Always our ultimate goal is that our students come away from the course having gained some knowledge and some experience and some tools to use as they move through their teaching and then their own work. And so the fact that as instructors, we are concerned about what they're getting and how they're getting it and how they're going to use it in order to support their student success. And I think that's your comment there about remember to keep the student in mind. That truly is why we're here, to make sure that they get what they came for and get it in a way that's going to work for them.
So to wrap us up, again, another quote. I told you guys I really like quotes. It says, and it's kind of lengthy, so bear with me. It was only when I discovered that feedback was most powerful when it is from the student to the teacher that I started to understand it better. When teachers seek, or at least are open to feedback from students as to what students know, what they understand, where they make errors, when they have misconceptions, when they are not engaged, then teaching and learning can be synchronized and powerful. Feedback to teachers helps make learning visible. I thought that was a perfect way to wrap everything up into a nice little bow for us today.
Absolutely. That's an incredible quote. Yeah, John Hetty is a very effective instructor, and that's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you. So that is it for me today.
And thank you, Jenisha. We all truly appreciate your following up on this and providing us with this, what could be considered a pretty unique perspective on feedback and how it impacts our classes and more, our courses, and more importantly, our students. So thank you for being willing to stepped up to the plate and share with us. Thank you so much.